Hello, everybody, and welcome to On the Road to DevHops. I'm Trace Bannon, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Brian Finster. And every once in a while, we bring a guest so that they can stand in between us and help deflect the battle. Today, we've invited Dave Farley. We've gotten to talk with him a number of times in the past. I believe Brian's worked with him a good bit. Dave, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm very well indeed, thank you. And thanks for asking me to come today.
So, Dave, do you mind giving just a little bit of background about yourself?
Well, hang on. You're forgetting the most important thing, Tracy.
Oh, well, it said intros before drinking, but...
What are we drinking?
Oh, well, we can start with that. So, to hell with who you are, Dave Farley. I want to know what kind of booze you got.
Okay, well, I brought with me a rather nice bottle of Talisker Dark Storm single malt Scotch whiskey. I'm hoping not to drink it all today.
We'll see how this conversation goes.
That sounds exceptionally grown up, very sophisticated. Brian, how about you, though?
Well, I meant to go buy a bottle of scotch in Dave's honor, but the liquor stores are closed on Sunday, and I forgot to do it Saturday because I was building a model of a 2001 EVA pod. So I'm drinking rum and Coke.
So I have my trusty coffee mug, which has coffee and special additives to make the evening that much brighter. And with that, so now we know we're a bunch of lushes who are bellied up to this bar today. Maybe not lushes, maybe just people who have fun. Dave Farley, you have such an incredible and rich history. I hate to put you on the spot, but 60 seconds about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a software developer, or that's the way that I think about myself. These days, it's probably more accurate to call myself a consultant. When I'm being funny, I sometimes call myself a consulting software engineer because I like Sherlock Holmes, and people who like Sherlock Holmes will get the illusion. I spent most of my career working in building real software, real systems. If I may say so, largely at the kind of slightly more complicated end of the spectrum, very high performance systems, technically tricky systems. I used to work for hardware manufacturers writing bits of operating systems and device drivers, those kinds of things. And in the latter part of my career, the last 20 odd years, building bigger distributed systems and so on. My career has kind of gone from building sort of products and, bespoke software of one form or another to working in consultancy, so advising organizations. And I've kind of consciously, I suppose, or accidentally sort of flipped in my career between doing those different things. So I've kind of got quite a broad spectrum. These days, I'm probably best known for a few things. I'm an author. I was one of the authors of a book called Continuous Delivery, which viewers of this will probably be familiar with, along with Jez. I've recently written a book called Modern Software Engineering, and I've written a few other books. I run a YouTube channel which is about software engineering, continuous delivery, what I think it takes, an opinionated view of what I think it takes to build better software faster, whatever it is that you're doing. And I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. These days I make a living advising companies on how to do those kinds of things. I don't write as much code as I would like. I probably write a little bit of code every week, but I'm not writing code every day anymore. And the kind of code that I'm writing doesn't end up in production very often. It's usually just an example or to show somebody or something like that. So I'm not the kind of hands-on developer that I was until not very long ago.
Yeah.
So one thing about the book Continuous Delivery, and you being very opinionated, when we started in a previous organization really trying to understand how to do CD, we bought your book. We took those opinions seriously. We were very hardcore about it. It was incredibly effective. So we have evidence that those opinions are correct.
Well, we have evidence that those opinions can yield good results in the hands of pragmatic people.
This is true.
That's true. And actually, I was going to reach behind me and get my copy, but I'm not going to. I was going to have you sign it so I could feel like, wow, So, because it was the same thing, and being in industry for multiple decades, and believe it or not, being in industry, it was an important publication. We all took a step back and began to really think and to listen and to take those things to heart. But I want to circle back just a little bit, the history that led up to that.
Yeah.
What led you to CD, right? What led you to on that journey? How did you connect with Jez to get to the book? But I really want to hear a little bit about the contextualizing what led up to that seminal publication.
Sure, and it was the real answer is that we were going through the process of trying to, I suppose, scale up extreme programming. Extreme programming kind of was, important to me, important to many of the people that I was working with at the time. And in the early days, when Kent Beck wrote the book, it was very strongly, firmly focused at small teams.
Yes.
And I started working in an organization that was taking significant advantage of extreme programming and building good software. The organization was called ThoughtWorks, and we were starting to do this on a bigger scale. So at one point, I think that I was the lead technologist for what was probably one of the biggest agile developments, extreme programming developments in the world at the time, building a point of sale system for a large organization in the very, very early 2000s. And that was challenging because extreme programming works fantastically well. Extreme programming is the agile practice that works.
Mm-hmm.
Scrum's the one that everybody likes, but XP is the one that works.
Yes.
And so, we were bought in, we were doing test-driven development, continuous integration, trunk-based development, all of those things at scale with these larger things. And that brings up some new challenges because software at the bigger scale is differently complex, I think. And so we wanted to maintain the philosophy and the approach and the joy of being able to work this way with really fast feedback and real clarity about, the impact of our changes and so on. But be able to do that with teams of hundreds of people sometimes on projects and so on. So we were playing with different ways of doing this kind of thing, and basically we got it wrong in lots of interesting and different ways. But because we were working in an agile way, we started fixing the things that we were getting wrong. A couple of the early things on this project, a few hundred people working on this point of sale system. The team had already done quite a good job of sort of automating deployment. So we'd got kind of a nascent version almost of infrastructure as code in place for this project. It was pretty well automated. We were rolling out changes to tens of thousands of stores for this distributed system on a weekly basis, and updating those stores and so on. But we were struggling with keeping our builds fast enough, of getting clear feedback around some of the bigger picture of whether things were working. At one point, I remember some people coming in and saying, the software doesn't work. All of our tests were passing, and they figured out that the software hadn't been working for 3 weeks because
and all the tests were passing.
All of the tests were passing, so we were missing something. And we were missing something in terms of configuration management. We were missing something in terms of being able to evaluate our software on the right scale. So we started thinking about those kinds of things. Other ThoughtWorks projects were kind of running into similar problems. One of the people that was kind of involved early on in some of this thinking was Jez, and he was working on a team with Dan North. And Jez and Dan and their team were facing problems in terms of automating the deployment. So these ideas, they kind of crunched together, and bit by bit, we were just finding better ways of organizing things, of structuring our thinking to be able to maintain the value that we'd seen in extreme programming on smaller, simpler projects, but keep it and apply it and allow it to work on these bigger, more complicated projects, more complicated just because they were bigger, really. No,
but it sounds like you did start small and then figure out. And the reason I say that is oftentimes I see folks not wanting to start small and quickly evolve. They come up with a strategy, a big bang for how they're going to scale their agility, scale their continuous integration, scale their CI/CD pipeline, scale the mentality. And they've never once gotten any kind of success or gotten their feet wet, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing. One of the things that I'm, as a consultant advising people on how to do things, one of the things that I'm nearly always saying to everybody about everything is just work in smaller steps. My wife was a management consultant until a few years ago, and one of the things that she used to advise, and a management consultant using kind of agile sorts of thinking, one of the things that she kind of drilled into me and reminded me of is, let's try and figure out what we can do this week that we can figure out whether it works next week. What can we do this week where we can see an impact next week? We'll try and really scale it down. So each change is simple. Each one's easy to back away from if it's wrong. And I think that's deeply part of genuine agile philosophy and approach.
I was speaking to someone recently about this, that I will assert with absolute confidence that if you are not able to deliver daily, you're not agile, that you don't have the ability to respond, that you're delivering every 2 weeks and thinking you're agile, but 60% of that's probably garbage that you didn't want to deliver anyway. What if we only had to deliver 60% of today's work to find out if it was garbage?
Yeah.
Or less.
Yeah. And going back to your previous point about going on that journey, this was the experience that we had was, hey, we had this book, it told us everything to do. Except that's not true. It gave us some clues on things to do, and it gave us some principles to follow. And we started with, why can't we deliver today? And then we just started hammering away at the problems. And then we learned. From a scaling point of view, we started off with a few teams so those teams could learn the lessons and then share those lessons so everybody didn't have to learn the same lessons at scale.
Yeah. But your point in all of this is getting back to defining the path to production. Ultimately, it's the only thing that matters. I heard this from a friend of mine years ago, and it caused a stir. Oh my goodness. So I was working with Deloitte Consulting, and we're a global, at that point, they were a global firm. And he made this statement. He said, the only thing that matters is working software in production. Now, he was saying that despite all of the methodologies, despite all of these other things, and that caused a kerfluffle. It really did. But more than that is the underpinning that you need to define the path to production, getting what is that path to production and bringing everybody along on the journey. The tech folks alone can't define it, right? It has to be a joint effort. It's a basic concept, but it's amazing how much it eludes people at times.
Well, and it's kind of strange in many ways. I think we are software developers, and we're working with software and computers and those tools, and yet a large part of our job, often in big organizations, we leave as the manual exercise. We don't apply the same kind of thinking, the same kind of techniques that we apply in other parts of our work to our own work, which is kind of funny. But what you said, I think is absolutely right. One of the ways in which I talk about continuous delivery, which is certainly one of my things, is that fundamentally it's about one thing. It's about optimizing from having an idea to getting that idea into the hands of users, and so that it's delivering some value or some fun to them of some kind, and then being able to gather feedback to see whether they like it or not. That's kind of it, and nearly everything else follows from that. So how do we, if we optimize just for that, however we achieve that, if we can do what Bryan says, if we can get to a releasable outcome once or multiple times per day, however we're doing that, we're doing a good job. And that gives us a kind of benchmark. That kind of gives us, I would argue, one of the ways of thinking about continuous delivery is kind of a second generation agile approach. And I think it's stronger than the first generation agile approaches because it's a bit more opinionated. It's a bit more definitive. You can't be doing continuous delivery if you can't generate your software, as Bryan said, at least once, a genuinely releasable unit of software at least once per day. I would slightly back off from what Bryan said in saying, in all circumstances, you might not necessarily release it, but it works, you can.
This is the difference, right? Because the thing that I really look at from carrying a pager for a couple of decades is that for me, continuous delivery has always been about optimizing for sleep. That I'm delivering frequently to verify that when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can deliver a patch safely, securely. You know,
you have an important word there, Bryan. Your important word there is you can. The difference between can and do, right? It means you can. I can push that button. I know that it will happen. I know that we can count on it. We know the quality of it. It's the decision on that final step. And that obviously is based on your context. You're right.
One of the things I want to touch on, because I talked to Paul Hammond about this. My old boss was friends with Paul. And I was talking to Paul, it's like, you know, what we discovered is it seems like the way to move teams, the way to uncover all these problems is not to just say, here, do more agile. It's why can't we deliver? Why can't we integrate working code to the trunk? Why can't we deploy that code to production? Let's solve those problems. And it's the most effective tool I've ever seen for uncovering all of the organization, not just team level problems, but organizational things impacting the team. That if instead of going to agile training, let's just identify why we can't deliver and fix the problems.
I don't want to send anybody to agile training anymore. It upsets me, the number of agile coach, and I know plenty of people who wear the t-shirt that says I'm an agile coach, right? I understand that they are helpers. They want to help people. At the end of the day, I do like the caddy concept as opposed to the coach. I want someone who be beside me, right? I want them elbow to elbow helping me to learn these things and to model the behaviors. But it's not until you do it.
Walmart, we were Sherpas.
Yes.
We've been up and down the mountain. We knew where Green Boots was. Green Boots was an unfortunate victim of Mount Everest. And we knew where the crevasses were, and we could show you how to navigate around them. So Dave, using that CD as the tool and not the goal, is that something that you've seen to be effective as well?
Yes. Everywhere that has genuinely gone for it, as far as I can see, in every kind of industry, in every kind of software development, with every kind of technology that people build software with so far, as far as I can see. No doubt, there are maybe out there might be something weird where it doesn't work, but I haven't found it yet. It works at scale. It works for safety critical systems. It works for regulated industries. It works for technically complex, difficult systems. It works for embedded devices. It works for hardware. And I think it works. I think the reasons why it works, this was kind of in the back of my head when I was writing my part of the continuous delivery book, but I was too nervous to say it in those days. Now I've got a bit more experience of seeing it in practice and other people adopting it, and now I'm less nervous. But I think it works for some really quite serious, deep reasons, which is kind of what my recent book is about. I think that what we found is a genuine engineering approach to delivering software. If I were correct in that, in other industries, what engineering means is it amplifies our chances of success. If we adopt an engineering approach to solving a problem, we can have a better chance of success than just crossing our fingers and making decisions based on rules of thumb. But this, I think this is different to that. So we have some guide rails. There are certain things that you can't do. I joke about Scrum. There's fundamentally, there's nothing really much wrong with Scrum as kind of training wheels for thinking about agility if you take it seriously. Most organizations that practice Scrum don't, and that's the problem. But there's not, but it's still not there. It still doesn't say anything about how you build software. It still doesn't say anything.
But I like your point though, as training wheels. It's great. It's great as a training wheel. I find almost every day that somebody will say, "Oh, well, can you help me? We want to start to use scrums. We want to sprint. We want to do this." Like, hold on, let's take a step back. What are your fundamentals? What are you trying to accomplish? Now, sometimes they will be organizations that are not writing software. They're creating training materials. They're doing ancillary things, tech adjacent, right? They're tech adjacent. So they know the words and the philosophies. But to your point, continuous delivery is an engineering science at this point. These are tried and true. Isn't that what we call patterns? They're things that we see repeated multiple times and then you adopt them because they're known to work. So why do you think that people push back so far on CD? Do you think it's because they don't understand it or there are misconceptions about it?
Well, I think it's genuinely challenging in a way that human beings find difficult to cope with. It challenges preconceptions, and there's some parts of it, rather like lean manufacturing, there's some parts of it that are somewhat counterintuitive. I think that's reasonable, but it works better than anything else that we know so far in terms of being able to build better software faster. And I can say that pretty definitively because we've got data and evidence that backs those kinds of claims up, and we can point to virtually every organization in the world that we think of as a leader in our field, and they're doing it in some form or another. So I can say that with a fair degree of confidence. But the thing that it challenges, and it's across the board. So it challenges software developers to work in smaller steps, to work incrementally, to be willing to do things like make a change that doesn't yet add up to a whole feature and have that released into production and not worry about it. That's quite a challenging idea if you've not come across that or worked that way.
No, and real quick, that's a really important point I want to touch on. I've had, over the past week, I've had several people tell me that it's just irresponsible to release incomplete features. I'm like, you absolutely must release incomplete features.
Yeah. Yes. Put your toggle on too. That's what a feature toggle is. Hello. Right. So yes, and because you're also validating that it's not breaking what already pre-exists. So it's a beautiful segue, right?
We know what to say.
Totally proving what's been done. We've made a small change. It's controlled. We understand it. We're running tests against it. We now have it turned off. It's in production. Hallelujah. Amen. The end users are not impacted by this until we decide that we want them to be impacted and then gain their feedback.
Well, and you said it's counterintuitive. So I'm a motorcyclist, and I take motorcycling very, very seriously because it's the only way to stay safe. Every corner is a challenge. And I tell people that there's a lot of things about riding a motorcycle that be very counterintuitive to someone who drives a car. If you're coming into a corner in a car and you're coming in too fast, you need to hit the brakes. On a motorcycle, you need to lean in. You need to steer harder, because if you hit the brakes, it'll stand the bike up. And where I live, that means you're going to run right off the hill. And so it's much more dangerous to do what seems safe in a car than it is on a motorcycle. It's the same thing. I mean, with CD, people think it's safe to bundle huge changes up and then run it through all kinds of people testing things, but they're not going to catch everything. It's so much safer to make tiny steps forward.
That's
one of my beliefs of this kind of this statement that I made earlier, that this is really genuinely a form of engineering for software, is what I mean by that is kind of the practical application of scientific style reasoning to solving problems. And I think it genuinely is that. I think it's, I can make a case that, that this is what we're talking about. And one of the key ideas in terms of being able to do that in terms of software development is that software development is always an exercise in learning. It's always about trying to discover and understand, what fits with our users, how we go, what solutions we can meet with that. And we're always exploring, because our cost of production is free, because we can just clone the bytes that represent a fully working system. So we're always doing something new in some context. And so if we're optimizing to do that, one of the key ideas that's really deeply important to that is working experimentally. And if we want to start applying an experimental approach to doing work, one of the key ideas there is that we need to control the variables. We need to be able to limit the variables so we can understand the impact of our experiments and the results of our experiments. And you can think of an automated test as an experiment or a release into production as an experiment. They are both different kinds of experiments. So if we are bundling up loads of changes, we're not controlling the variables. How do we know that this idea had the impact that we wanted it to if we're releasing it alongside of 50 other ideas? We can't tell. We don't know which one had the impact. If we're releasing them in tiny little pieces, we've got a better chance of narrowing down our focus and understanding the impact of any given change. So that's just one way in which working in smaller steps is safer and clearer about what's going on.
It's actually a risk reduction technique. People don't
Absolutely
hear that, but it's 100% about reducing risk. I find that people get caught up on some of the words, though, like experiment. I have an entire group that I work with who are afraid of that term, because experiment sounds like you're throwing it away. And we're trying to help them understand that an experiment will have an outcome, not a success or a failure. Let's just say it has an outcome.
There's this assumption that happens that because we decided to build it, it's the correct thing to build. It is an experiment. Okay, we might throw it away because it's the wrong thing to build. Would you rather throw away the whole thing when it's done and we decide we don't need it? Or would you rather throw it away early on?
You know, I liken that to when my kids were small. This is a goofy analogy, but when my kids were small, when there was a new food, they did not have to heap a whole bunch of it onto their plate, right? Because we didn't want to have to throw out a whole plate of food, but we called it a no thank you bite. It was the tiniest amount that was on their plate, and they could make a decision if they liked it or not, but they couldn't say no. There was a CD, continuous delivery of food. They weren't allowed to say no. Now, the funny thing is that comes back to haunt me every now and again, you know, like, Mom, you're going to try this? No, I'm not. Yes, you are. It's a no thank you bite. But it's the concept, right? Smallest amount possible, smallest amount possible. That can be, and when I say smallest amount possible, it couldn't be such a small dollop that it didn't exist, right? It had to be, they might not like peas, but it has to be at least one piece, enough that they can get the texture, enough that they can get the flavor. Unit. A tasteable unit, a minimum viable taste. Yes. So
minimal viable pea.
Okay, that just didn't sound right there, Dave.
No, but I mean, I think that's a really good way to look at it, right? I mean, this is the problem. What I've discovered is a lot of people have problems with the whole concept of Agile, because I think it's just, we're going to break a waterfall project plan down into 2-week waterfall project plans. But the point is that we don't even know if this is the right thing. If we're not saying we're going to deliver all these things. This is product development. We're inventing new things.
Yes.
We don't know if we're making hypothesis, that value hypotheses and running experiments against the value hypothesis.
Well, that's why some of the focus on estimation lately, it keeps popping up in different forums, where it's going back to some of the traditional, we've done this a dozen times, therefore we know exactly how long it's going to take. No, it's going to be about, we're going to try it in a day. This is the smallest package or the smallest amount that we can think about it, and breaking it down into those smaller bits. And now I'm not saying that you don't do any kind of rough estimations, and that as you learn and grow that you get better at it. But you remember the hundreds and hundreds of lines that would be in a WBS structure, the old in the Gantt chart, and the estimation, and people would negotiate, and you would get into these hardcore meetings where you're debating whether something was 1,000 hours or it was 1,002 hours, because you had to make it all work financially.
I literally had my manager push me back on a project plan I put together. He said that it was going to take too long. I said, the only way we can shrink this project plan is to remove the testing. And I was right, by the way. We did it on his timeline because we had to remove testing.
Okay.
But Dave, there's something, you talked about your new book, Modern Software Engineering, and I thought that book, I loved it. I thought it was something that if you wanted to get in this career, you should be forced to read this book before you start. I mean, no, seriously, it's honestly, I think, that important a book to read, because it just nails down everything. But, Tracy and I, we're fanboys. What have you seen from other, have you got any negative responses from it? Or have you seen people who were not fanboys who are now? Or what sort of response you got from people who weren't already bought in?
There's been some critical reviews, and the critics, and they're all, they're a small minority, I'm pleased to say, but the criticism is that it's repetitive. I can understand that criticism, because what I'm describing is a very related set of practices that are intertwined and feed off each other. And so in order to be able to describe them and the reasons why I think they're important, I have to explore the relationships with other ideas and other parts. So the book's divided up into largely kind of 3 parts, which is optimizing for learning, optimizing for managing complexity, and the tools that allow us to bring those ideas together, continuous delivery being one of those tools, and speed that we've talked about being another, optimizing for speed. So optimizing for learning is about experimentation, feedback, working incrementally, iteratively, and so on. Managing complexity is about things like modularity, cohesion, separation of concerns, coupling, those sorts of ideas. And so you can't really talk about cohesion without talking about coupling as well. You can't really talk about separation of concerns without talking about modularity. And so that's the criticism that people have made, and I can understand that. The other criticism that 1 or 2 people have made is that it doesn't give any actionable behaviors. And if I'm honest, I just don't understand that criticism, because I think the book's full of actionable things. But the way that I tend to think about and approach software development is a little bit idiosyncratic. I don't think it's very important what programming language you use, or whether you're writing stuff in functional versus OO, if I'm honest. Those things are interesting. I'm a nerd as well. I can go to the pub and argue about that, what my favorite one of those things is, but I don't think they're deeply important. I don't think that at the level of principles and practices that have an impact on your work, I don't think they matter very much. The value of writing something, I don't know, in C# versus F#, I don't think there's a huge difference in terms of building real world systems. I think the problems are other than that.
No, Tracy and I actually had a conversation about this a while back, that the technology is unimportant compared to the problems we're trying to solve, and we should use whatever tools make us most effective to solve that problem.
Right.
I've had both business people and developers both push back on me super hard and explain to me that that wasn't their job, and they're wrong.
Wait, you're not going to solve the business problem. You're not going to solve the mission challenge. It's not your job. It's everybody's job. I don't care if you're a technologist. That's where I chose to live my life, because that's the sprinkles on the ice cream, as I like to say. I love technology. All of this other stuff has grown because I couldn't get anything done. The humans got in the way, and the way that we were approaching them, I remember responding to an RFP, a request for proposal, and there were thousands of predetermined requirements, and therefore we spent months writing, not code, writing a response that was given to them in 8 full 2-inch binders for them to read along with the electronic version, but they wanted them printed. That to me is mind-boggling. That was never, that's waterfall, right? But that's also not solving a problem together, trying to assume that people have all of this predetermined knowledge.
So this triggers me a little bit. When we were moving to CD for that initial thing, we were moving from quarterly delivery to aiming for daily delivery. We figured if we can aim for daily delivery, we might get to weekly, but we'd find a lot of problems, right? The unexpected benefit from that was I'd forgotten how fun it was to deliver. Early on in my career, I was delivering whenever I wanted to. I would make a small change, I'd deliver that small change. I was impacted by the fact that I had to rebuild the system and take down production to get that done. So there's only so often we could do that. But I'd forgotten how fun it was to actually see my stuff working.
Right. And
once we started doing that, it was addictive. As a development team, we became addicted to delivery. We're like, how do we do it faster? Because that's so much fun.
But what you're driving to a beautiful point. whether you're a technologist, whether you're a developer, or you're someone who's traditionally been more focused on automated testing, whether you're the business, everybody gets obsessed and energized when they start. But it's that first couple of steps, right? We need to get a pathway to production. No, we can't do that. We've got these folks over here. Or, to something Dave mentioned. When Dave mentioned this earlier, I'd be interested to hear, I deal with a lot of folks that we're talking about embedded. And so they don't want to deliver daily. They actually push back against that, and they're safety critical. They've got some very tremendous processes in place. How did you apply CD in those, mindset wise, in those environments where it's not just going to the cloud, it's not just a business app?
Yeah, I think you attack it on a few different fronts. If you're talking about it organizationally, as we said before, it's challenging for people, and it challenges many assumptions. And part of this is a rather provocative thing to say, but part of the problem is that it's my perception that probably the majority of people in our industry have never seen what good looks like. And that's a terrifying thought. Very much so. The difference between what good looks like and what average looks like is enormous. We are talking about kind of 10x kind of differences. Between what good looks like, in my experience. I think that one of the things that I'm proudest of the degree to which I've been able to promote continuous delivery and all that sort of thing. There's loads of technical stuff that we can talk about, but one of the hallmarks of a team that's adopting continuous delivery is that the people that are engaged in it love it. They think it's fantastic. And so if you can start leading people to these practices, almost always, they're going to like it better. It's not that you're dragging them into something. They might resist it before they've tried it, but as soon as they start trying it and they see it, they're in, usually.
That seems like it would.
This was the experience in the dojo as well. I mean, we helped several teams move to, we get them to continuous integration. We couldn't get them to continuous delivery in 6 weeks, but it would take a couple, 3 weeks to get them over that hump and get them to believe this is actually a real thing, that there's incremental things that are slowly getting better. And teamwork's getting better. We have more clarity of our work. We're getting better at testing. We're getting more confidence. And, I gave a talk in 2017 with a teammate of mine, and we had a slide at the very end that said, it was a DevOps Enterprise Summit, and it's fully staffed with nothing but managers and VPs. And I said, how many people in this room is a manager? And of course, everyone raised their hands. So I was like, excellent, this last slide's for you. Don't send your teams down the path of doing continuous delivery, get cold feet and pull back, because they're going to keep driving that way, but maybe not for you. And this is you're building high performing teams with high performing people. You have the people there, you're growing them. You don't have to hire smart people. You have smart people. You've just enabled them to be super effective and shown them it's going to be a better way to work. And then you got scared. They're going to go somewhere where they can do that.
I think that's a really excellent point. It's not the technology is the easy, hard part, right? We love the technology piece of it. The workforce is an amazing conundrum right now, keeping people, enticing people, right? Being able to bring in new people as you start to grow. If you can evolve your culture, if you can excite people, they're going to talk to others that are there, right? They're going when first time I'm hiring you, you are going to want to talk to people. You are going to check Fishbowl or Glassdoor, whatever those things are, and you're going to get that this is exciting and that we're going in that direction. But if I hear like, oh, it's a paycheck, but we do things pretty traditionally. We're thinking about that. We've got a DevOps office over there, and there's that DevOps team over there, and I've got a digital transformation person over there with their multi-year strategy.
I have a DevOps engineer configuring my pipelines for me.
There you go. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said about how CD the concepts of CD, the execution of CD can actually address some of our workforce challenges. We need more people. We need them to be excited, and we need them to want to come in and solve cool problems.
Well, and one other thing I want to touch on real quick is that it wasn't just the team, the developers that loved it. You know, once you got the business to understand what's happening. Oh yeah. I mean, when we first piloted this, where I was, we had a direct line to our end users and distribution centers on Slack. We were sending out releases to a set of early adopters and getting feedback from them. They'd make suggestions on, hey, what if we did it this way? And we'd turn around and change within the 24 to 48 hours and say, how about this? Right? You don't get that from requirements gathering.
What? Yeah, well, even the business didn't like that. The business got bored with it. They hated it. They avoided these JAB sessions, the weeks and weeks of stuff. They don't want that either. They love being engaged. And they love, more than that, they love seeing that something that they said has manifested. You heard me and you did this, or you helped me think it through even more full body.
Yeah, this gets to one of these deep ideas, which is that, you know, if you think about the difference between kind of an agile approach to development and a waterfall approach to development, in waterfall development, you've got to, at some level, you've got to know all the answers before you start. You know, in order to kind of establish the plan, you've got to think about, so inherently, fundamentally, profoundly, that's a limited approach. There's some kind of cap on how complex a system you can build with a waterfall approach, because you've got to understand it all at some level. In an agile approach, it's completely unbounded. We can start off wandering about, kind of figuring out what the problem is and what part of the problem we're going to solve. This this makes people uneasy. This makes people, you know, worry. But this is how science works. This is how engineering in other disciplines work. This is how you build great things, how you do creative things. You try ideas out and you say, that idea doesn't work. We're on the wrong path. We've got to go down this other path. And you try these things out. I think one of the most profound things, the most profound differences in these two approaches is that traditional ways of thinking start with the assumption that we understand the problem. Agile approaches start with the understanding that we almost certainly don't understand the problem, so we're going to defend against our ignorance and we're going to be able to react to it. That makes it dramatically more robust, and it gives us many more targets to shoot for. Instead of having one solution to the problem of our plan or our goals, we've got a myriad of solutions that we can explore, and we can choose which directions we go in and so on, which gives us a lot more chance for success. And we see that, we get too much, and we kind of know this, fundamentally this has been a feature of our world for a long time. The first cars were nothing like as capable as modern cars. That's a process of engineering evolution over a century or so of car manufacture, until now we've got cars that will automate some of the driving problem and all sorts of clever things, and safety systems, things that will protect people, that over time have evolved and we've learned how to do. If that was a waterfall project, they'd have had to predict all of that at the beginning. That's not how the world works.
Exactly.
So if we want to solve big problems, we've got to apply better solutions, and this is a better way of just undertaking problem solving, I think.
I wrote down on my notepad, defend against our ignorance. That will make it onto my wall of quotes. I absolutely adore that, Dave. We've got one last question for you, and that is, dude, you are pumping out so much amazing content right now, and it's free. Come on, what's the real scoop here? What's going on?
Well, I came to a point in my, it's an accident. It's first of all.
Okay.
So I came to a point in my career, my continuous delivery book was selling well, and I was in a job that was nice. My employer was nice and so on, but I wasn't loving it. It was all right.
Okay.
And my friends and family were saying, you should just start your own business. So I started my own business as a consultant. That's kind of when I stopped writing software every day for a living, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I was doing all right. I was doing pretty well as a consultant. I was in demand. I was traveling around the world, you know, too much. My carbon footprint was lousy. The pandemic hit, and all of that stopped. So we weren't in financial hardship or anything, but we were kind of saying, oh, what are we going to do now? So I kind of had in the back of my mind the idea of doing a YouTube channel, mostly for fun, because part of my job satisfaction is that I think these ideas are important and can have a big impact on people's chances of success and the fun that they have while they're doing it. So I wanted to spread the word a little bit more widely. So I thought it'd be fun to try and do that on YouTube. And that was dramatically more successful than I expected. These days, so now what's happened is that that's become kind of a job, in that I'm spending it takes a lot of effort to script these things and record these things and so on.
Oh, it
Yeah,
does.
that's why we don't bother. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we were so ramshackle. Just, you know.
So now a little while ago I started to try and find ways in which I could support, you know, myself and my family doing that kind of thing and doing stuff that I like. So we make a bit of money from sponsorship on the YouTube channel, which is great. My consultancy's kind of exploded because I'm in demand, because people like my content,
Exactly.
which is good, but you know, it's limited how much bandwidth I've got. So we do online training courses and so on. So our business is kind of pivoting a little bit in terms of being more online and therefore a bit more scalable. But we're doing pretty well at the moment off the back of it. So we carry on doing it. And it's a family firm. So my wife helps me, my sons help me, and we're just having fun doing it largely.
You are a true role model, Dave Farley. You're always so fun to talk with. You are always so energetic. I love the fact that no matter where you are in your journey, you're always pushing the envelope a bit more, but you're sharing it. That's probably the most important thing to me, is that you're not keeping it to yourself. You're putting it out there and you're sharing with everybody. Bryan, anything you'd like to close with?
Other than the fact that ever since you started releasing those videos, I've been using them as a tool, and they've been incredibly helpful, and a lot of people find value in them. And so the entire community appreciates it. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Very much so. Well, Dave, we'll give you one chance for a final comeback here.
Well, thank you very much. I'm blushing a little bit at your praise, but
it's the alcohol. It's the alcohol. It's the alcohol.
But mostly I'm doing it because it's fun. And if anybody hasn't come across the channel, go to YouTube, search for Continuous Delivery. You'll find my channel. There's some good stuff on it. There's one really nerdy thing. Is anybody watching this and you'd like to know about how you program a quantum computer? I found out, and I made a video about that recently, which I nerded out because I got to explain my layman's understanding of quantum physics, because I'm a physics hobbyist, and so I was delighted by that. It was so much fun.
Well, we will include your links in the, yep, we will include everything about that, Dave, in the links. We'll grab that from you after we close out. I want to thank everybody for coming along on this journey with us. Topics that you want to discuss, questions that you have, heck, people that you want to hear, come on here, or if you want to come on here and get in the middle of Finster and I drinking, please just reach out to us. Love to know. Absolutely. And volunteer.
And we forget the whole like and share thing. Dave does that so well, and we just don't.
No, just. All right, everybody. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next On the Road to DevHops.
Thanks, folks.